So, here we are in week 2 of our series, Wholehearted Living. Last week, we taught, what was it last week? Yeah. Gosh, it's been a long 7 days. Last week, we talked about worthiness. And if you're going to live a life with your whole heart, you have to eventually deal with the issue of worthiness. And we're all worth being loved. You know, some of us don't feel it, but we're all worth being loved. And when you fully tap into that, you can then unlock your heart to live life with your whole heart. Today we're going to talk about the tools, the quote-unquote tools of wholehearted living. And there are 3 main things. They're different, but they're so interconnected that you need to have them all fully in order to have any of them fully. It's kind of a weird thing. And so they're courage, compassion, and connection, right? Those are the 3 things we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to frame it in the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector, which I actually think was last week's lectionary reading, but the story fits here. So I'll just read it for you. It's in Luke 19, and it says, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he is gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anyone out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Like he says, and if. And if I've cheated anyone. Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. There's so much. It's a nice story. On the surface, it's just a nice story. But if you know anything about the times, Zacchaeus would have been hated, absolutely hated by his own people, being a tax collector. And not just a tax collector, but he was like the boss of the tax collector. So here's how it worked back then, probably a lot like it works today. But the tax collector would, they would have a certain amount of money they'd have to give, and so the tax collector could, though, charge anything they wanted and keep the rest, right? And so if you were the chief tax collector, you also probably took a skim off of all your other tax collectors, right? So this dude was rich. He was rich and hated. Okay, so frame this story this way. It's not that Jesus just went to be the guest of a sinner. He went to be the guest of a man who was so reviled in his community that nobody would have been spending time with him at all. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So the first part of this is courage, right? I said courage, compassion, connection. I personally struggle with this idea of courage, and part of it is today, in our culture today, we think of courage as heroic, being a hero. But the original Latin of the term courage doesn't mean heroic. It means to speak one's mind by telling all of one's heart. Speak one's mind by telling all of one's heart. It means being open and honest about who you are and how you feel. That's courage. Another way to put it is heroicism. Being a hero is about putting your life on the line. Courage is about putting your vulnerability on the line. It's a little subtle difference. But I struggle with this idea of courage because and some of you may think that this is a lie, what I'm about to say, because you've experienced me have some pretty distinct emotions, but in general, I don't get too excited about much, and I don't get too low about much, right? My emotions generally are in a pretty confined space. Angela, what's that?
It's frustrating.
Angela said that's frustrating, and I was going to give, thank you, segue, I was going to give the illustration that it doesn't matter what it is. She'll ask me, what'd you think of that movie? It was okay. Did you like that meal? Yeah, it's all right. those are my pat answers. And it's not that I don't like things, or that I dislike things, that I don't dislike things, but for some reason, and it's probably a defense mechanism to guard against pain, but I don't allow myself to express those emotions fully, right? I don't enter into those. I'm not open and honest about those emotions. So that's where I struggle with this idea of courage, about being open and honest with who we are and how we feel. What I have learned, especially lately, but I know this to be true, I mean, I can see it throughout my life, is that if you keep your emotions caged like an animal, eventually it's going to break free and maul someone, right? That and Dawn has been mauled once or twice already by my emotions, right? So I know that this is true. We have to be open and honest about who we are, who we really are, not just who we want people to think we are, but who we really are, and how we really feel. If you don't do that, and again, you can't do that unless you know that you're worthy of being loved, right? You can't be open and honest about who you are if you don't think you're worth anything, because that will just lead you down a spiral of negativity, and you don't want that. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one in this room that struggles with this. We all like to bring out our representative to people. Right? I used to tell people that would meet my mom, because I would tell stories about my mom, or things about me growing up, and and people wouldn't believe me. Right? Angela's family, great example of this. It took years for Angela's parents and grandparents to believe the things that I was saying about my upbringing, my childhood, and just my relationship with my mom. They couldn't believe it. And then it was made worse when they finally met her, and she brought her representative to the table, right? How many of you growing up had a friend who said, man, I love your mom, or I love your dad, your mom and dad's not that bad, blah, 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 right? How many of you had that? And you're like, what are you, psycho? You don't know my mom. You know her representative. My mom was great at bringing her representative out on the phone. She would literally be yelling at me, yelling, hello? And I would be like, what? That person's not real. Where's that person 2 seconds ago, right? I know I'm not the only one that struggles with that. Keeping our emotions hidden, bringing out our representative. Well, here in this story, we have a man who put his vulnerability on the line. Now, they talk about it in a couple of different ways. Zacchaeus was a short man, he's a little guy, and so he had to climb up this tree in the story. It's really kind of, I envision this being kind of probably Tony. He's such a little guy, he's going to have to jump around and try to see. So he gets up in this tree, and now he becomes a target, a non-moving target, right? He has basically put himself out there for everybody to see, and he kind of looks silly. He kind of looks like a fool, which I'm sure the people loved. There's a reason why he couldn't see all the way in the back. Remember, he was hated. They weren't letting him up front. You would think money would have gotten him privilege, and maybe he could have if he wanted to be an even bigger jerk, but he didn't do that. He climbed this tree, puts his vulnerability on the line because he was curious. Because he wanted to see what this Jesus was about. So he puts his vulnerability, he is open and honest enough about himself, about what he wants, about how he feels, that he just says, you know what, I want this bad enough that I'm just gonna go ahead and put myself out there. And he did, and he got ridiculed for it. And so did Jesus. Jesus got ridiculed for hanging out with him. So, being open and honest about who you are, how we feel. That is courage. You need to have courage if you're going to live your life with your whole heart. And you need to have courage in that way. It's not about putting your life on the line. Yeah, we need heroes, but we need more people with just ordinary courage. ordinary courage, and that's just the ability to interact with folks openly and honestly. Right? Next one, compassion. Compassion's another word that we sort of have we misuse the word, or we have an idea that it is something that it originally was not. When we think of compassion, a lot of times today we think of compassion about being loving, which isn't wrong, but it's just not complete. Or sometimes just being really, really nice, I feel, or sympathy, things like that. But again, the original form of the word literally means to suffer with. Compassion means to suffer with. It's not about pushing it out there. It's about entering in. And you in Jesus, so when we say be compassionate like Jesus was compassionate, start to do a mental inventory of how Jesus showed compassion, right? And here is a prime example in this story of how he does this. Most reviled person in the community. Not only does he say, that's not a problem for me, but he's like, I'm going to go to your house. He spends time in his house. In what had to have been a very, very difficult, in the story even, the people are griping about Jesus hanging out with this guy, right? But Jesus enters into this man's suffering, and it's hard to say that a rich man like that suffered, and he brought it on himself too. That's the thing. He brought it on himself. So we're sitting here in our location, in our world today, thinking of a guy like that, like he's probably got what he deserved. Jesus didn't say that. Now, my struggle with compassion is I tend to want to be a fixer. I want to be a fixer. So when somebody's hurting, take Angela for example. Angela will come to me and she will vent about some problem somewhere, right? And throughout our relationship, I then try to fix it, like, well, you should do this, you should do that, and whatever. And that, never fixes anything. But that's my problem. That's my problem, because I want to fix it. And so we've gotten to the point now where when she starts, I go, wait, just so I know where my space is at, do you want me to do anything with this, or am I just listening? All right? And I have to know that, because I'll think of it differently. I will literally listen to it differently if I'm just supposed to listen. But I tend to want to be a fixer because I don't want to experience my own pain, let alone anybody else's. No amen on that one? Because I'll tell you what, we all sitting in this room, none of us want to experience our own pain, right? And we don't want to do that, and so we push it away, and therefore we marginalize everyone else's pain too. We marginalize everyone else's pain because we don't want to experience our own. And that is, I just want it to go away. We want the pain to go away. We need the pain to go away. I talked, I think last week, about the advertising industry being responsible for making us feel unworthy. Right? It's also highly responsible for helping us self-medicate in so many ways. Not just medicine, alcohol, sex, drugs, whatever. Just tons of different ways that we numb pain. Push it off, right? And I struggle with that just like everybody else. I don't want to experience any pain. So we don't want confrontation. We don't want confrontation. And confrontation happens when two representatives don't agree. When two representatives don't agree. In this story, I said it before, but there are so many times when I see a situation and I go, yep, that's what they get. Some of you might have actually heard me say that phrase already. Yep, that's what they get when they do blah, blah, blah. Right? We don't want to feel our own pain, so we marginalize other people's pain, and we forget the fact that even if they brought it on themselves, that the pain is real, and it's not our job to judge how they got the pain. Amen. I think of our opioid epidemic right now as a great example of this. There's a clear divide. There's a clear divide on how to take care of this. And I'm not going to tell you how to think on this, but I will say this. As Christians, as followers of Jesus, it's not our job to say, you did this to yourself, so you get what you deserve. or to say, well, they're just going to go back and do it again. Yeah, Jesus knew that. He knows how people are. Our job as Christians, as followers of Christ, is to figure out how to bring that love into the real world for real people.
Amen.
Angela and I both have people in our families that have struggled with addiction. None of them ever got better by being told they were horrible people and they deserve what they got. Right? That's not compassion. I know I'm not the only fixer. I know I'm not the only blamer. Yeah, I'll leave that there. There's more I could say, but I know I'm not the only one. Jesus doesn't go into fix-it mode with Zacchaeus here. He doesn't go into his house. At least we don't have the story this way, but so I'm going to go with it. But we don't have Jesus going into his house saying, all right, now that I'm here, you got to do this, that, and the other. You got to stop. He never tells Zacchaeus to stop collecting taxes. Notice that. There are a number of times where people sort of confess, I'll use that as the word, confess their own sin to Jesus before he ever says, don't do this. Woman at the well, great example of this. Confesses her sin, sort of, and he's like, all right, don't do that anymore, I guess. Don't do that, do better. Here, another example. He doesn't tell him stop collecting taxes. He doesn't tell him stop cheating people. But just by Jesus' compassion of entering into a life with Zacchaeus for a few minutes, even, just a little bit of the day, Zacchaeus has changed. Jesus has such a powerful force of good and love that when you encounter it, you can't help but want to be better. Zacchaeus is he says it here. Now I read a book recently, I think it might be in the Portrait of Jesus, that the story gets told that what Zacchaeus says here about giving back half, and then if I cheated anyone, give him 4 times as much, that it was either that or What is the Bible by Rob Bell. Both of them tell this story and talk about it in different ways. But those claims are ridiculous. Like to say that he would be broke if he really did that. But the fact that he was so moved to want to do that. Now, whether he actually lived it out or not is another story. But Jesus was there and he just wanted to be different. Jesus never said, don't do this, you're a bad person, you get what you deserve. Here, let me fix your life for you. Jesus didn't do any of that. His compassion is entering into the suffering of this man, made that man want to be better. And that's what we need. We need to do that better, all of us. Every person in this room, including me, needs to do that better. We need to be able to enter into people's situation and be just so loving that they cannot help but be altered. That they can't help but be altered. Compassionate people do not try to fix people's pain. They try to sit down in the middle of it with them. So if you aren't comfortable feeling your own pain, you're never going to be comfortable feeling somebody else's. Now that doesn't mean we like pain. Pain is a defense, it's a response, it makes us want to do something. It's there for a reason. It serves a purpose. But you can't constantly push it away. At some point you have to embrace it and work through it.
Amen.
To embrace it and work through it, because if you don't, you're never going to be able to enter into anybody else's pain. And that is where compassion is in other people's suffering. We all need to do that better. The flip side of that is that compassionate people also get to experience profound joy. Right? They get to experience profound joy with others. But if we're not compassionate, we tend to want to steal other people's joy or rob them from experiencing it. Again, I don't feel highs or lows, right? Which means I don't experience much of my pain, but I don't get to experience much of the joy either. And so when other people are truly, authentically, just really happy and really filled with joy, I look at them with suspicion. Right? Then that laugh says, I'm not alone. But compassionate people don't rob people of their joy, they enter into their joy. Compassionate people are just authentically happy for other people when they're happy.
Amen.
They don't try to take it for themselves. They just go, oh my gosh, that is awesome. Right? I wish Odell were here so I could explain to him that it's okay to be happy when the Steelers fans are happy. It's okay, right? And that's a funny little, but it really is. I mean, it is true. It's both sides of that. So we've got courage, being open and honest about who you are and how you feel. Connected to that is compassion, when you enter into other people's pain, other people's suffering, other people's situation fully. That is compassion. So doing those two things, which leads me to connection. And I'm going to have to read these right off of here because I just have a number of bullet points about connection, and then I will try to connect them after. Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, valued, and heard. Right? It's the energy that exists between people. It is the spirit at work between people when they feel seen, valued, and heard. Connection occurs when people derive strength from relationships. Right? If you're in a relationship that drains you, a soul-sucking relationship, that's not connection. Well, at least it's not mutual connection. It's like a leech. Right? And some people can leech off of each other in such a way that when they finally separate for a little while, they get energy because they find life-giving relationships. I wasn't going to use this, but I don't have a better illustration for this. Angela's mom and her sister, right, are two individuals that are really high emotion. They're very high emotion. And so they need people in their lives that are also equally high emotion, but that can also sort of take that energy. You know those kind of people like that. If you aren't that kind of person, when you're done talking to them, you're just like, right? So there's two of them, and they're like connected, right? Super connected in such a way that they drain each other. Rather than giving each other energy, they drain energy from each other, right? And I've noticed this for years and years and years, and this isn't a secret. I've told them both this. You guys really are draining each other. Well, they've separated for a little bit. They've been separated for a little bit from each other, and it's amazing. Like, neither of them will want to admit this, but it's absolutely amazing to watch both of them sort of take their energy has just risen, right? And they're both living life in such a different way now because they have found relationships that are energizing, right? And that's connection. That's connection. Sometimes the connection is bad. Sometimes the connection is just bad. You need to find out if that is true with your relationships. Connection occurs when we value others for who they are and not what they offer. Connection occurs when we value others for who they are and not what they offer. Again, this is a struggle for me, right? It's a struggle for me because in the church we find this a lot where people, it's like, what can you do? Are you going to do this thing? Whatever. And then we only really care about them when they're doing stuff. Or if they're doing stuff. Right? But take that out, and I know I'm not the only person in this room that sees people that way. Not all people, but we all have somebody that we only really care about when they can do something for us. We all have somebody. But connection, true, authentic connection occurs when we value people for who they are. Now, this gets back to the idea of courage and compassion, right? If you're not open and honest with who you are, how's anybody else going to know who you are? They're connecting with your representative, and your representative gets tired eventually, and then they're going to find that they're connected to somebody that doesn't exist. Connection cannot happen alone. Duh. Sounds obvious, but we try. How often do we try to go it alone? Right? Here's this. I'll bet there are a considerable number of people in this room who have no problem offering help, but they will never ask for it. Right? want to help, or we never want to ask for help, right? We'd love to offer it. We'll give it out, but we don't want to ask for it, right? That's not connection, though. That's not connection. That's lording. That's superiority. It makes us feel better about ourselves to do that. Connection requires us to seek help from other people. It requires us. It's a two-way street. We can't be compassionate unless we are willing to have others be compassionate with us. We cannot enter into another's suffering fully unless we are open and honest and willing to let them enter into ours as well. It goes back to being open and honest about who you are. All these things are connected. Now, I struggle feeling genuinely connected with a lot. Not here. I mean, not just here. Like in general, throughout my life, I've had a struggle feeling connected with and connecting with others. And a part of that, I think, is because I haven't had the courage to be open and honest about who I am and how I feel. And I haven't, again, I said I struggle with entering into people's pain because I don't want to feel my own, right? So when those things are absent, then it's just really difficult for people to get to know who you are, to care about that, and then to connect with that. So again, if you don't have all of these things in full measure, it's really difficult to have any of them at all. I'm probably not the only person in here that doesn't feel seen, valued, or heard a good amount of the time. I'm probably not the only one. It's my cue. Don't worry, this is actually going a lot quicker than I thought. So I think I told Lisa yesterday, that's a long one. But it's not going that bad. But yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna say everybody in this room has some struggle with feeling seen, valued, and heard for who they really are. It is a struggle. It is hard. It is hard. But Jesus was cool like that. He valued people for who they were, not what they did or who they even could be. For Jesus, there was no, this is what you could be. This is who you are. Jesus valued people for who they were, and it made them want to be better. What's that movie? Oh, the one where he says, "You make me want to be a better man." Come on, you know that movie? That's what I think of when I think of this. Like, Jesus isn't going in there trying to fix it all, right? Jesus just valued Zacchaeus for who he was, not who he could have been. But it made him want to change it, right? Jesus connected with him for who he was. Not his representative, not what the people said he was. Jesus saw him. He valued him. He heard him. He loved him. Real life example of this for me. Honestly, this happened for me. I've told this story about Angela, our relationship. When Angela met me all those years ago, 2001 is when we started dating, right? I was a much, much different person when she met me. And even before that, I'd had a little bit of a buffer from the time I moved from Cleveland to Youngstown. I grew up in inner city Cleveland, went to an all-black school. What you see now is not what you would have seen 20 years ago, right? And that's what Angela entered into. She got me rough and tumble right out of the inner city, right? And we're talking a girl who lives in Struthers, grew up in Struthers, and had a family way different than my own. Now, it could have been well within her to want to change me. In fact, I'm sure she did, on many levels, want to change things about me. But Angela never tried to change me. She didn't. She just saw who I was. She loved me for who I am. And in response to that, I want it to be better. I want it to be more. You make me want to be a better man. That's Jesus in my life.
Amen.
Right there. That's a real life example of how this works. Now, it's taken time, right? It's taken a lot of time. And it's not finished. but I am who I am today because somebody saw me. Somebody valued me. Somebody loved me. Not who I could be or what I should be, but me. And my response to that was to want to be better. Response to that was to want to be better. She connected with me. And I connected with her. So what do I want you to do with all this? Well, probably seems pretty obvious. I want you to be honest and open and honest with yourself and others about who you are and how you feel. That's not always going to feel great. It's going to make you vulnerable. It's going to make you vulnerable. But you got to be open and honest about who you are with both yourself and other people, or else none of this is going to work. You're not going to be able to live your life with your whole heart if you can't be honest about who you are and how you feel. I want you to be compassionate with others. Compassion isn't something we are, I wrote, compassion isn't something we are toward others. It is something we are with others. Right? We don't show compassion to people. We are compassionate with people. It's a subtle difference, but one of them keeps people at arm's length. One of them is like, one of them is charity, and the other one is living. And then I want you to connect with others. Connect with others. I want you to love them. Not who they are, not what they do. I mean, not who you think they should be, not what you think they should do, but them as people, where they are at the moment. Love them so fully that they can't help but want to be something else. Right? Imagine if we had the courage to talk openly and honestly about who we are and how we feel. Just imagine that. That's kind of a scary thought. Honestly, it is a little bit scary. If you were completely open and honest with other people about who you are, they got to see all the good and the bad. Imagine, though, what that would open up. People would be able to see you for you. Not who they built you up as in their head, but you for you. Imagine if we suffered with others instead of trying to fix them all the time. Imagine if we suffered with others instead of trying to fix them all the time. And that requires us feeling our own pain. It requires us to feel our own pain. I'll tell you what, so many barriers, so many walls between people, between communities, between enemies, could be broken down if we were willing to suffer with them. This whole opioid thing would look so much different if we were all willing to enter into that suffering. How did it get there? Why? Nobody wakes up a heroin addict.
Amen.
Nobody starts that way. Stuff happens to get you there. Stuff happens to get you there. What if we entered into that journey? You would never hear somebody say, you brought that on yourself. If you were to bring it, yeah, maybe they made the choices. Maybe they made the decisions, yeah. But you know what? Sometimes when you have two really crappy decisions, you're going to pick the one that self-medicates. We all do it. So we shouldn't be sitting here trying to fix the problem from arm's length. Let's get in there. Let's get in there and figure out what life happened to get to that point. The reason why we have an opioid crisis is because life is hard right now. Life is hard for a lot of people right now.
Amen.
Instead of pushing it out there, we need to bring it in here. And that's going to make us vulnerable, and it's going to make them vulnerable too. But in the end, there will be healing, because we will then be able to say we saw, we heard, we valued them for who they are instead of what we want them to be. So I want you to connect with folks. Imagine if we did that. Imagine if we had the courage, the compassion, the connection. Those are the tools that you will need to work on and cultivate and build up inside you if you really, truly want to live life with your whole heart. It's not easy. It is not easy, but it's so worth it. When I catch glimpses of this for myself, it's just worth it. She's worth it. You know? It's awesome when those things come together. And listen, I would love to stand here and say, you're going to be able to do this with every single person. You're not. Jesus didn't do it with every single person. He couldn't. Well, I don't want to say he couldn't, but he didn't. Put it that way. Jesus had disciples, and then he had the 12, and he had 3. There were 3 that he just emptied himself into, right? In this way. So, I'm not saying you have to do this to everybody, but if you do it to 3 or 4, you're going to find that how you deal with the others also improves. It also improves, right? So that's where we are with this. You got to remember that you're worthy to be loved, and then you have to work on compassion, compassion, connection, and courage. And that will keep you on the way to living a life with your whole heart. Now, next week, Pastor Vicky is going to be over here preaching about barriers. What are some of the barriers that we deal with in living our lives with our whole heart? A lot of it is going to be talking about shame and guilt. Those are some of the barriers, and she's going to break that down in a really, really compelling way. Don't worry, this message series will take an uptick. I promise you, and it'll take an uptick because we're going to actually talk about some of the different, I'll call them guideposts, but things that you can do. Like things, really ways to live this out, like things that you need to cultivate and make happen so that you know that you're doing it, that you're feeling it, that you're living life with your whole heart. Right? Pray with me. Father, I'm so thankful for this congregation. I am so thankful for this congregation. I am thankful that you've placed me here to help with my struggles so that we can all help with each other's. Father, I ask that your Spirit be present with us this week. Make yourself known to us. Let us feel you. Drive our hearts to be courageous, to be compassionate, and be connected. I pray this sincerely and earnestly. I pray this in your Son's name. Amen.